when we talked about physicians, we talked about their salary. And one of the things that we noted was that in general, the more physicians that were within a group practice, the more money each one made. So let's revisit that and look a little bit deeper into that. So again, in general, the more physicians that are in a practice, the more net income, the more profits each one makes. So there's really three reasons for that. The first one has to do with economies of scale. And if you remember with economies of scale, it said that the greater the output, the lower the average cost. Right? The more units produced, the cheaper each one on average becomes. The reason for that, for the most part, was you get to spread out the fixed costs across more of them, and so everyone ends up being better off. And if you remember in graph form, actually let me do it this way. And oops, let's clear that for a second. All right. And so if we draw here, and we have our average cost here and our output. And so what happens with economies of scale, it says that up to this point here, where average costs are minimized, the greater the output, the lower the cost per unit. So this area within here is your economies of scale. So why does that happen with doctors? Well, what happens with doctors is the greater the number of, let me back up. So when we talk about costs of a doctor's practice, a doctor's office, we said that a lot of the costs end up being from staff, labor costs. Another component of that is machinery. And with a lot of that, by doctors coming together, right, they're able to spread those costs out between more. So for example, let's say a doctor has an office, okay, and that office has 2 exam rooms and one person working the front area doing clerical work. So now that one doctor has to pay 100% of the rent and 100% of the cost of that person working the front desk. But now if you bring another doctor in, all right, which if it has 2 to 3 rooms, you can accommodate 2. And so now that rent is being split between 2 doctors, and the worker is being spread across 2 doctors. And what tends to happen though, as practices get larger and larger, they can then get things like x-ray machines, or they can buy materials in bulk. And so all these things end up lowering the costs overall, or the average costs. The second reason why more physicians lead to more net income for all is because of market power. So with market power, what that means is basically more doctors working together create additional business for others that they otherwise wouldn't get. So for example, let's say there's a 2-doctor practice, and the doctor, you have to get, one doctor fixes knees, another one fixes shoulders. Okay, one does surgery on knees, the other one does surgery on shoulders. Right. Well, you have to have knee surgery, so you go to the doctor. Right? That doctor gives you surgery. And so let's say then a couple years later, you injure your shoulder really bad, so you have to get surgery again. Well, if those 2 doctors were separate, you may have gone to the other doctor, the one that does the shoulders, but you would have looked around a little more. But because they work together, you can say, all right, well, I went to this place before, I had a good experience, there's another doctor that works there, and so I'll go to that doctor. And so that other doctor, the shoulder specialist, was more likely to get that patient, so that he got an additional patient out of it. And so what you see then is you see these very large practices, right? They get a lot of basically referrals from other doctors within there, right? And they get a reputation built, word of mouth. The Rothman Institute is a great example. Most people don't know any doctors at the Rothman Institute, but because they know a lot of people who went there, they've heard things, and maybe they went there before, and so let's go to another doctor. And so this all builds up a greater patient base. Third reason why more physicians end up resulting in more money for all of them is the idea of risk sharing. So within different professions in the medical field, there are certain risks with the FDA or changing trends or different standards with medicine. All that can negatively affect the doctor if that doctor is in that field. But when you have a large practice, what happens is the other doctors can kind of pick up the slack and prevent the doctor from having to leave. And so to get over any periods, which may be bad ones, by sharing that risk, they kind of balance it out a little bit. So for these reasons, for these three reasons, that's why you tend to see cases where practices with larger doctors or more doctors end up having more money for each doctor.